Former President Mike Pence just wrapped up his campaign event in support of Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. But it's also clear that Pence is setting the stage for a presidential run of his own in 2024, possibly going head-to-head with the president he treated with utter devotion right up until the moment the boss sent a violent mob to the Capitol to threaten and maybe hang him. As the New York Times points out, this is an emphatic break between the one-time running mates who have not spoken for nearly a year, but have also not publicly waged a proxy war until now. Pence, his aides say, knows full well that going down to Georgia, he knows what that represents. Joining me now, Jason Johnson, professor of journalism and politics at Morgan State University, and Greg Bluestein, political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who's in Kennesaw, Georgia, the location of tonight's Kemp rally. I want to start with you on this. We've got a little bit of sound for Pence, of Pence doing his campaign shtick for Brian Kemp. Let's play that real quick.
Tomorrow's primary election comes down to this. Who is best positioned to defeat Stacey Abrams and the National Democrats that will descend on Georgia in this fall's election? Well, you know the answer. Brian Kemp beat Stacey Abrams 4 years ago, and with your support, Brian Kemp will do it all again in November of 2022.
Greg, what was the energy? I mean, we can hear the cheers there. What was the energy for Pence? Because we know a lot of base Republicans wanted to hang Mike Pence.
Yeah, there's hundreds of Republicans here, mostly mainstream Republicans who had endorsed Brian Kemp, who supported him, a lot of stalwarts from his 2018 campaign. You know, a crowd of hundreds, not an overwhelming crowd, but really a crowd that you would see at many of Brian Kemp's events. This was a closing rally, and the message you heard from Vice President Pence was a lot of, that was kind of the summation of the entire message he had throughout this rally, which was that Governor Kemp would be more electable than David Perdue. He did not once mention Donald Trump.
And you know what's interesting, Jason? When I tell you every ad here is about Stacey Abrams.
Yes.
I mean, she's pretty much I don't care what you're running for.
See, this is the thing. When you have that kind of brand, but you have made yourself an intimate part of Georgia, they can't escape it.
Right.
And they can't turn her into a monster either. So I'm not surprised. Kemp says that he wants this rematch, but he also has no choice about this rematch.
Choice, right.
Exactly. And I think Abrams in particular, look, I was just talking to some activists and organizers in the southern part of the state. They're seeing massive early turnout. They're seeing 3 times as many people who turned out in 2018, 150 over what they saw in 2020, despite the voter suppression being put forward by Raffensperger, by the current governor. I think, I wouldn't say they're scared yet, but if you're bringing down somebody like Mike Pence, it's because basically Kemp knows I've got to get these mainstream Republicans because he may lose the MAGA crowd once it comes down to the fall.
That is the question, Greg, is whether or not the MAGA crowd, who hate Kemp because he didn't throw the election to Trump, will be strong enough voters for him. You know, Perdue said he might not even accept the results of the election. So how does the Republican Party then organize for Kemp? Because the other side is going to be 100% organized for Stacey Abrams.
Jason's exactly right. I mean, the biggest fear for Governor Kemp right now is that a portion of that MAGA crowd never comes back into the fold. And he's using Stacey Abrams as this sort of arch villain who can galvanize Republicans, whether they be pro-Trump Republicans or whether they be more moderate Republicans, all to channel their fury to the ballot box. And he has not let up whatsoever. He is, even with the polls showing him well above the 50% mark, Brian Kemp wants to show that he has a mandate. He wants to close the door shut, nail the coffin shut on David Perdue's political career tomorrow.
Well, and also he doesn't want to run off.
Right.
We don't know how that's going to go.
He doesn't want Perdue to say, like, I'm going to run as an independent.
Right.
Or for Perdue to keep screaming and pouting all the way through the fall. This is a very precarious time, honestly, for the state Republican Party. They could blow this. They could blow this on a lot of levels. And they're not just running against Stacey Abrams. They're running against basically Stacey Abrams and Raphael Warnock. Extremely popular people. And then they still have the albatross of Herschel Walker that they're going to have to deal with. Because Brian Kemp really want to run with him. So they're in a tough spot. This may not be as easy for Republicans as it was in 2018.
Look, the Marcus Flowers thing, it's a very, very red district. But it is not going to be a not interesting race. So, if all across, I mean, you're going to have now black constituents that are going to be stuck in that district with Marjorie Greene. And they got this guy who actually is appealing. He's not running an ideological campaign. He's not a far left-wing candidate. He's like a military veteran with this great, biography. So it does feel like Republicans are setting up in Georgia for not a cakewalk.
No. And And they have done this to themselves.
Yes.
The voter suppression has resulted in people being more angry, more galvanized, more committed to the voting process. And that doesn't mean that the voter suppression isn't affecting people.
Right.
It just means that it's gotten people more and more organized. Yeah, it's made them mad. And here's the thing, going into the fall, you have two relatively popular candidates.
Yeah.
Nobody can say anything mean about Warnock.
No.
Nobody can say anything mean about Stacey Abrams, who was like the Federation, you know, in Star Trek. Like these are people who have kept themselves connected to the state. They haven't gotten brand new. They haven't gone Hollywood. And that's going to be a real challenge for the Republicans.
Greg, I guess the question then becomes in November, who has more pull here? Pence or Trump? I mean, does Pence actually have any kind of, does he have a fan base? Like, if Trump decides that he hates Kemp so much that he'd rather see him lose to punish him, could Pence help at all in November?
I think this is more important for Pence than it is for Trump. Trump is still by far the most popular Republican figure in Georgia, and he'll continue. He's not going to wake up on Wednesday and suddenly decide that he likes Brian Kemp after more than a year of disparaging him. So Brian Kemp still has to worry about the Trump effect. But the thing he might have going in his favor, and the thing I keep on hearing from Democratic strategists that they worry about, is that in contrast, in comparison to David Perdue, Brian Kemp, who was the first lifelong Republican governor in Georgia history, very conservative, seems a little bit more mainstream. So he could try to use that to pick off some more middle-of-the-road voters by comparison to David Perdue.
Let's talk a little bit of national politics here. So there's a couple things that have gone on, Jason. You've got the Ron DeSantis surge among base Republicans. So Wisconsin does this straw poll. Ron DeSantis actually beats Donald Trump. So if you like Trump, but you want somebody that's Trump without a sense of humor, and that's, you know, an open fascist rather than a one with a funny one, you go with DeSantis, right? You've got that happening. You've also had this statistic, which is terrifying. At least 357 sitting Republican legislators are in closely contested battleground states have used the power of their office actually used it to try to overturn the 2020 election. That accounts for 44%. 4 in 10 Republican legislatures in 9 states have tried to actually overturn the election. How does that wind up affecting November?
You see it in every single state. It has been a cliche my whole life, your whole life. We've all heard this is the most important election, but no. The last 4 have been the most important elections of your life. You've got people running now. You've got secretaries of state running in Georgia. You've got the challenger to Raffensperger. You've got the Republican gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania. You have Republicans now who are running explicitly to overturn any election that does not elect a Republican in 2024. And you and I both know you've had people run in the past as like, I'm going to bring this state to. That's not what these guys are saying. No. They're saying, I don't care what the vote is. Pennsylvania is going to go to the Republican in 2024. I don't care what the vote is. I'm going to find those 11,000 votes that Donald Trump was asking for. So that is the danger that we're facing nationally this year, while people are still facing voter suppression by some of these legislators.
Greg, so I guess the question is just the tea leaves around Kemp and Raffensperger. If given the order to do it again, given the order again in 2024 to flip the election, do either of them say no?
I would wager yes, they would say no, because look, they'd be in their second terms. Governor Kemp wouldn't be able to, wouldn't run again if he wins, right? And so they'd be freer. And certainly he owes Donald Trump no favors. Raffensperger might be the most fascinating politician in this entire cycle in Georgia, because a year ago, people, including me, counted him out, thought that he wouldn't even qualify. And now he's looking like he's headed at least toward a runoff against Jody Hice, the congressman who's backed by Donald Trump. This guy was a pariah, Raffensperger, among Republicans, and now he's got a real shot, and maybe an outside shot of an outright victory.
Who wins the gubernatorial? I mean, it's going to be Kemp, right?
Yeah. Well, I think he's going to win the nominee.
I mean, the nomination.
He's the nomination.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's going to win this fall, but the other race I want to talk about real quick is Bordeaux and Lucy McBath.
Yes.
We're going to end up losing a great member of Congress no matter who
what
ends up winning
happens. That is such a shame. They are 2 solid candidates, and one of them is going to be no longer in Congress. Jason Johnson, Greg Bluestein, great conversation. Thank y'all very much. And that's it. That's tonight's ReidOut.